"Don't let her die," the stranger ordered, and every hardened man around him obeyed without asking why. Rain washed the blood from the pavement before I even understood I was dying. My vision faded in and out beneath the flickering streetlight as cold water soaked through my uniform. Somewhere beyond the blur of flashing headlights, expensive black SUVs rolled silently into the alley, their engines humming like predators that never needed to roar. I recognized the man stepping out before my mind could make sense of what my eyes were seeing. Ethan Moretti, the Mafia Boss every detective in New York knew by name, but almost nobody could prove existed. The man I had spent 4 years trying to bring down. His tailored black coat darkened beneath the rain, yet he never seemed hurried. Men twice my size lowered their heads as he walked past them, waiting for instructions that came only after he studied me with those calm gray-blue eyes. "She still has a pulse," someone muttered. "Leave her," another replied quietly. "She's a cop." Ethan never looked away from me. "No," he said, his voice steady enough to silence the storm itself. "She comes with us." I wanted to reach for my service weapon, but my fingers barely moved. The last thing I remembered before collapsing had been chasing an anonymous source who promised evidence connecting organized crime to someone inside the police department. I never reached the meeting. Someone else had found me first. Whoever wanted that evidence erased had nearly succeeded. Ethan knelt beside me, ignoring the puddles soaking his custom-made suit. He noticed my clenched hand before anyone else did. My fingers refused to let go of a small metal flash drive stained with rain and dirt. He carefully pried it free without hurting me. The instant he saw the symbol engraved on its surface, something changed behind his expression. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. Recognition, not fear. Something older, something buried. "Impossible," he whispered so quietly I almost believed I'd imagined it. One of his captains leaned closer. "Boss." Ethan closed his hand around the drive. "Get the doctor ready. Move now." No one argued. Within seconds, I was lifted onto a stretcher that hadn't been there moments earlier. These men moved with impossible coordination, like they'd rehearsed every emergency long before tonight. As the SUV doors closed, I drifted between consciousness and darkness. Sirens echoed somewhere in the distance, growing fainter instead of closer. Through half-open eyes, I watched Ethan studying the flash drive instead of me. Whatever symbol was carved into that piece of metal mattered more than the dying police officer lying 3 feet away. That realization frightened me more than the rain, more than the pain, more than the man himself. Because Ethan Moretti was famous for calculating every move. If he had chosen to save my life, then somewhere inside this nightmare, there was a reason that had nothing to do with mercy. Hours later, when I finally opened my eyes beneath unfamiliar white lights, the first face I saw belonged to the one man I had sworn to arrest. Ethan stood beside the window with his hands behind his back, watching the city skyline instead of me. "You're awake," he said without turning around. "Good. Because someone wanted you dead." My heartbeat quickened as I searched for the flash drive. It was gone. Ethan slowly placed it on the table beside my bed. "There's only one problem," he said. "It's completely empty." I pushed myself upright before the dizziness could win again. The room smelled too clean to be a public hospital, and everything from the polished wood walls to the silent medical equipment whispered impossible amounts of money. My right hand reached instinctively beneath the pillow where I usually kept my backup knife. Nothing. My holster was gone. My badge was gone. Even my watch had disappeared. Only the dull ache across my ribs reminded me that the alley had been real. The window reflected the Manhattan skyline, glowing beneath the early morning sun. Wherever I was, it overlooked half the city. Ethan Moretti remained motionless beside the glass as though he had been standing there for hours. "Where am I?" I asked. "Safe," he answered. "That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters." His calm voice irritated me more than any threat could have. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed despite the protest from every muscle in my body. Before my feet touched the floor, 2 men outside the door shifted their weight. I never saw their faces, but I knew trained security when I heard it. "Am I your prisoner?" I asked. Ethan finally turned toward me. His expression never changed. "If you were my prisoner, the door would be locked." I looked past him. The door stood slightly open. He was right. I walked toward it anyway. No one stopped me. The hallway beyond looked more like a private estate than a medical wing. Doctors moved quietly. Security officers nodded respectfully as Ethan stepped out behind me. Nobody looked surprised to see the most powerful mafia boss in New York walking through the building as if he owned every square foot. Maybe he did. You should be asking who wanted you dead, he said. I already know who wants me dead. No, you know who you expected. He handed me a tablet displaying photographs from the alley. My abandoned police cruiser. The broken streetlight. The empty intersection. Then another image appeared. My body lying exactly where I remembered, time-stamped 3 minutes before Ethan arrived. Another followed. A black sedan leaving the area less than 60 seconds earlier. Who took these? I asked. My people. You were watching me? No, I was watching someone else. That answer lingered in my mind long after he lowered the tablet. It was too precise to be a lie and too incomplete to be the truth. Before I could press him further, one of his senior captains entered without knocking. Boss. Ethan accepted a secure phone without taking his eyes off me. He listened for several seconds before ending the call. One of our warehouses was compromised before sunrise, the captain reported. Only 5 people knew the location. Ethan nodded once. Then one of the 5 is no longer loyal. There was no anger in his voice. Only certainty. He looked at me again. You believe your department has a leak. I know my family has one. Someone is feeding information to both sides. I folded my arms despite the pain. Why tell me any of this? Because whoever arranged your ambush also exposed my operation within the same night. That is not coincidence. He placed the metal flash drive onto the table between us. My experts recovered nothing from it. No files. No hidden partitions. Nothing. I stared at the tiny engraved symbol that had captured his attention in the alley. Then why did you save me? For the first time since I had met Ethan Moretti, silence lasted longer than comfort allowed. His eyes settled on the symbol instead of me. Because I have seen that mark before, he said quietly. And everyone connected to it was supposed to have disappeared 10 years ago. The first thing I did after leaving Ethan's estate was break every rule I had ever enforced. I did not report back to headquarters. I did not answer my captain's calls. I did not file an incident report. If someone inside my own department had arranged the ambush, walking through those doors would have been like volunteering to step into the same trap twice. A black sedan waited across the street as promised. The driver never introduced himself, and I never asked. 20 minutes later, he dropped me 3 blocks from my apartment before disappearing into morning traffic without looking back. Everything felt wrong. My mailbox had been forced open. My front door looked untouched, but the tiny strip of transparent tape I always hid along the frame had been broken. Someone had entered while I was gone. I slipped inside carefully. Nothing appeared stolen. My furniture remained exactly where I had left it. The family photographs were still on the shelf. Even my coffee mug sat beside the sink. It was too perfect. Someone had searched the apartment without wanting me to notice. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered without speaking. Do not go to precinct headquarters, Ethan said. How did you get this number? You have more important questions. Like why I should trust a mafia boss. A brief silence followed. Trust your instincts instead. Someone accessed your personnel file 27 minutes ago. The line went dead. I immediately opened my laptop using an offline backup drive that I kept hidden inside an old law textbook. Every investigative note connected to my last case had disappeared. Months of work were gone. Someone with department-level access had erased everything. Except they missed one thing. Inside an encrypted folder sat a scanned photograph I had forgotten existed. It showed a charity banquet from 11 years earlier. Politicians, judges, business executives. I had originally saved it because one city councilman had later been convicted of corruption. This time another face caught my attention. Standing near the back of the room was a man wearing a silver cuff link engraved with the exact same symbol from the flash drive. I enlarged the image until the pixels blurred. Then my heartbeat stopped. The man had been identified years ago. According to every official record, he died in a warehouse fire 3 years before I joined the police academy. A knock interrupted my thoughts. 3 slow taps. Not the hurried rhythm of a neighbor. I looked through the peephole. Detective Ryan Collins stood outside, holding 2 cups of coffee. Ryan had been my partner for almost 2 years. I wanted to open the door immediately, but Ethan's warning echoed in my mind. Someone inside the department had searched my files. Someone inside had known where to find me in the alley. I kept the chain lock fastened. Claire, Ryan said with a tired smile. Everyone thinks you are dead. Let me help. Before I answered, my laptop chimed softly behind me. A secure message had appeared on the screen from an anonymous sender. It contained only one sentence. Do not open that door. The attachment beneath it loaded automatically. My apartment building security camera showed Ryan arriving alone. 30 seconds later, another frame appeared from a different angle. A second man stepped quietly into the hallway behind him and disappeared outside the camera's view. Ryan never turned around. Either he did not know someone was there, or he was expecting him. I stood perfectly still, staring through the peephole while my heartbeat drowned out every other sound in the apartment. Ryan waited patiently, holding 2 paper coffee cups as if this were any ordinary morning. Behind him, the hallway looked empty, but the security image glowing on my laptop told a different story. Someone had followed him into the building, then vanished beyond the camera's view. I stepped away from the door without making a sound. Another message appeared on my screen before I could think. Leave through the fire escape. Do not let him know you saw the video. There was no signature, but I already knew who had the resources to watch my building in real time. I grabbed my backup laptop, slipped the photograph into my jacket, and quietly climbed through the kitchen window onto the narrow metal staircase. The cold November air hit my face as I descended toward the alley. A black SUV was already waiting. The rear door opened before I reached the sidewalk. Ethan sat inside, reading a thin folder as though he had not orchestrated my escape with impossible precision. You have exactly 8 minutes before your apartment is searched again, he said without looking up. My partner is upstairs. Yes. Is he involved? Ethan closed the folder and finally met my eyes. I do not know. That is why I refuse to gamble with your life. I climbed inside, still unsure whether I had just escaped a trap or walked willingly into another one. The vehicle pulled away without attracting attention. No unnecessary conversation followed. Ethan spent the entire drive reviewing photographs, financial records, and maps spread neatly across the leather seat beside him. Every few minutes, another secure message arrived on his encrypted phone. He answered with 1 or 2 quiet sentences before returning to his documents. This was the first time I truly understood why his organization had survived for so long. He was not reacting to events. He was staying 3 moves ahead of them. Nearly 30 minutes later, we entered a private underground garage beneath an old warehouse along the Hudson River. The building looked abandoned from the outside, but inside it operated with flawless efficiency. Men and women moved between workstations filled with monitors, shipping manifests, satellite maps, and financial reports. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody wasted a step. Ethan walked through the room, and every conversation stopped for only a heartbeat before continuing. Respect followed him more naturally than fear. One of his senior advisors approached, carrying another folder. Boss, we confirmed the warehouse leak, he said. The shipment location reached the DeLuca family less than 20 minutes after our internal briefing. Ethan nodded once. Cross-reference every communication from the last 72 hours. Freeze all external deliveries. Nobody leaves the organization without my approval. There was no anger in his tone, only absolute control. His advisor disappeared immediately. Ethan turned toward a wall-sized digital map covered with colored markers representing territories across New York. 3 markers had already turned red overnight. This was never about one police officer, he said quietly. Someone is forcing every family toward the same war. I unfolded the old banquet photograph beside him. Then explained this. His eyes stopped on the silver symbol. For the first time since we met, the calm certainty on his face cracked. Only slightly, but enough for me to notice. That man cannot be alive, he murmured. He died years ago. Before I could ask another question, alarms flashed silently across several computer screens. One analyst looked toward Ethan without speaking. The entire room seemed to freeze. The analyst finally broke the silence. Boss, one of the 5 captains just accessed a secure account using credentials that belonged to a man who was declared dead 3 years ago. No one in the operations room moved until Ethan raised one finger. The silent alarm disappeared from every monitor at the same instant, replaced by ordinary logistics screens as though nothing had happened. That single gesture told me more about his leadership than weeks of surveillance reports ever could. Panic was never allowed to spread inside his organization. Control always came first. Ethan walked toward the central table where a digital blueprint of New York covered the surface. His 5 captains gathered without being summoned twice. No one spoke until he did. "Someone wants us looking in the wrong direction," he said. "The stolen credentials are bait. Find the person who benefits from us believing a dead man has returned." The captains exchanged brief glances before dividing assignments with practiced efficiency. There were no arguments, no raised voices, only immediate execution. I watched from the edge of the room, realizing I was witnessing the command structure that had kept the Moretti family ahead of every rival for years. Ethan turned toward me after the others dispersed. "You came here to hunt a criminal organization," he said. "Instead, you found one trying to stop a larger disaster." "I have not forgotten who you are," I replied. "Neither have I." His answer carried neither pride nor apology. It was simply a fact. An analyst hurried across the room, carrying a tablet. "Boss, we traced the secure login. It originated inside the police evidence archive for exactly 43 seconds. My attention snapped toward the screen. "That is impossible," I said. "The archive is isolated from outside networks." Ethan looked at me instead of the analyst. "Unless someone inside opened the door." Every piece suddenly aligned inside my head. The empty flash drive, the erased case files, my apartment search. Someone had never intended to steal information from me. They wanted to know how much I had already discovered. "The evidence archive," I whispered. "That is where the Betrayal file is." Ethan nodded slowly. "The flash drive was never meant to carry data. It is a key." Before I could ask another question, one of his intelligence officers projected an old architectural diagram across the wall. Hidden beneath the police headquarters sat a climate-controlled records vault built decades earlier, accessible only through biometric authorization. "Most officers do not even know it exists," I admitted. Ethan folded his arms. "Then whoever targeted you expected you to forget about it." His phone vibrated once. He glanced at the encrypted message, and the calm expression on his face hardened almost imperceptibly. "The DeLuca family has begun moving personnel toward the waterfront," he said. "Too quickly. Someone is feeding them our responses in real time." He immediately issued new orders. "Cancel tonight's shipment. Relocate every financial record. Move the council meeting to Site 7. Tell every captain only what they need to know." Watching him redirect an entire criminal empire in less than a minute was like watching a chess master sacrifice pieces nobody else realized were expendable. He was not merely protecting territory. He was forcing the unseen enemy to reveal another move. He looked back at me. "You are going into police headquarters tonight." I stared at him in disbelief. "Half the department probably believes I disappeared." "Exactly," he replied. "They will be watching every public entrance." "Then how am I supposed to reach a secret vault?" Ethan slid a faded maintenance badge across the table. The photograph showed a city electrician who had retired 8 years earlier. "Because you are not going in as a police officer." Before I could examine the badge more closely, every light inside the operations center flickered once. Emergency backup systems activated instantly. An analyst removed one earpiece and slowly looked toward Ethan. "Boss," she said quietly, "someone just disabled every surveillance camera around police headquarters exactly 5 minutes before we planned to go there. They already know we are coming." The city looked strangely peaceful from the passenger seat as we crossed the Brooklyn Bridge just after sunset, but I knew better than to trust appearances anymore. Somewhere beneath the ordinary rhythm of traffic, someone had already predicted our next move. Ethan sat across from me inside the customized SUV, studying a folded blueprint instead of the skyline. Every few minutes, another encrypted update arrived on the small tablet resting beside him. He never reacted emotionally. He simply absorbed information, adjusted the plan, and moved 3 steps ahead. "If they disabled every camera around headquarters," I said, "they want us blind." Ethan shook his head. "No, they want us looking at the cameras instead of the people." He tapped a different section of the blueprint. "Watch the maintenance tunnels." I looked closer. Beneath police headquarters ran an old network of utility corridors abandoned decades earlier after a renovation. They no longer appeared on public building plans, yet Ethan somehow possessed the original engineering drawings. "How did you get these?" I asked. "Power belongs to the people who remember what everyone else forgot." It sounded less like a boast than a philosophy. 30 minutes later, our vehicle stopped inside a dark service garage several blocks away. Ethan never left anything to chance. 2 teams quietly dispersed in opposite directions, not to confront anyone, but to observe. One monitored traffic. Another watched emergency radio frequencies. A third tracked financial transfers connected to rival families. I finally understood that his empire survived because information mattered more than intimidation. Before I stepped out, Ethan handed me a small earpiece. If anything changes, you leave immediately. I thought you said I was going into the archive. You are. But retrieving the truth is more important than proving courage. I almost smiled despite everything. Coming from the most feared mafia boss in New York, that sounded strangely human. Wearing the faded city maintenance jacket and carrying a worn toolbox, I entered the utility entrance beneath headquarters without attracting attention. The old identification badge passed the first checkpoint exactly as Ethan predicted. The basement smelled of concrete, machine oil, and old electrical equipment. Everything looked forgotten. Too forgotten. Following the blueprint, I reached an unmarked steel door hidden behind obsolete circuit panels. My pulse quickened as the biometric scanner illuminated. There was no keypad, no handle, only a fingerprint reader that should not have recognized anyone except authorized personnel. Before I could examine it, my earpiece came alive. "Claire," Ethan said calmly, "do not touch the scanner." I froze. "Why?" "Because someone activated it 30 seconds before you arrived." I slowly stepped back. At that exact moment, another voice echoed faintly through the corridor beyond the door. Two people were approaching from the opposite direction. They were speaking quietly enough that I could not recognize the words, but one sentence reached me clearly. "She should already be here." My heartbeat accelerated. They were not searching randomly. They were waiting specifically for me. I slipped into a narrow maintenance alcove just before their footsteps entered the hallway. Through a small gap between the pipes, I recognized the first man immediately. He was Deputy Police Commissioner Harold Pierce, one of the most respected leaders in the department. Walking beside him was a sharply dressed businessman whose silver cuff links carried the same symbol engraved on the empty flash drive. Pierce unlocked the hidden vault without hesitation. The businessman smiled and said, "After tonight, both the Moretti family and the police will destroy each other exactly as planned." I held my breath as they disappeared inside. But before the vault door closed completely, the businessman turned slightly toward the hallway and quietly added, "Unless the mafia boss has already figured out we wanted him to hear this." My pulse hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to remain perfectly still inside the narrow maintenance alcove. The vault door closed with a heavy metallic click, leaving only silence behind. Ethan had warned me that every answer would create a bigger question. Now I understood exactly what he meant. Deputy Commissioner Harold Pierce was not investigating corruption. He was protecting it. I waited another full minute before quietly stepping toward the biometric panel. The display was still glowing. A tiny green light blinked twice before fading. Someone had overridden the security system from inside. My earpiece crackled softly. "Claire," Ethan said. "Report." I kept my voice barely above a whisper. "Pierce is inside the vault with the man wearing the silver symbol. They know someone is following them." There was a pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. "Leave the corridor immediately. There may be evidence inside." "That is exactly why you are leaving." I closed my eyes for a second, frustrated. "You are asking me to walk away. I am asking you to stay alive long enough to expose them." His words settled the argument before it began. I trusted evidence. Ethan trusted patterns. So far, his instincts had kept both of us alive. I retraced my steps through the maintenance tunnel until I reached an abandoned electrical room. A hidden door opened before I touched it. One of Ethan's intelligence officers stood waiting beside a portable communication station. "The boss anticipated they would flush the corridor," she said calmly. "You were never supposed to enter the vault." "Then why send me?" "Because he wanted them to believe you would." She handed me a tablet already displaying live satellite images of Lower Manhattan. Colored markers moved across the map with incredible precision. 3 rival mafia families had begun converging toward the waterfront exactly as Ethan predicted hours earlier. Every convoy, every shipment, every financial transfer appeared on the screen almost in real time. He already knew there would be a meeting tonight? I asked. He knew someone wanted him there. Before I could process that answer, Ethan himself appeared on a secure video connection. Behind him, I recognized the conference room inside his headquarters. 5 captains stood around the table awaiting instructions. The DeLuca family believes we are moving our council meeting to Pier 41, Ethan said. We are not. One captain frowned. Boss, only our inner circle knew the real location. Ethan looked slowly around the room. Exactly. The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. He pressed a button, and the large monitor displayed communication records from the previous 72 hours. One captain's encrypted device had transmitted a coded signal every evening at exactly 11:34. The man's face drained of color. I can explain, he began quietly. Ethan never raised his voice. You already have. 2 security officers escorted the captain from the room without resistance. No shouting, no threats, just absolute certainty that his place inside the organization had ended. Ethan turned back toward the camera. One leak is closed. Another remains inside your department. I looked again at the photograph of the businessman with the silver cufflinks. Who is he? Ethan answered without hesitation. His name is Victor Ashcroft. Even the intelligence officer beside me looked surprised. He disappeared a decade ago, she said. Ethan nodded once. That is what he wanted everyone to believe. Before anyone could speak again, another encrypted message flashed across every screen in the room. It contained a single live photograph. Ryan Collins stood outside my apartment building talking calmly with Victor Ashcroft, and beneath the image appeared one sentence that made every person in the room fall silent. Tomorrow morning, Officer Claire Bennett will be arrested for conspiracy with the Moretti family. By sunrise, every television station in New York carried the same breaking headline. My badge, my photograph, and my name filled every screen as anonymous sources claimed I had secretly worked with the Moretti family for years. Watching my career collapse in real time should have broken me. Instead, I kept staring at Ethan. He never looked surprised. He stood inside the operations center with one hand resting on the edge of the strategy table, studying the news exactly the way a chess player studies an opponent's opening move. This was always the plan, he said quietly. Not ours. Theirs. I folded my arms. They are turning both sides against us. Ethan nodded once. Good. That means they believe they are winning. One of his advisors hurried toward us carrying a sealed envelope that had been delivered by courier only minutes earlier. There was no return address. Inside lay a single invitation embossed with the silver symbol that had haunted every step of our investigation. The message contained only one sentence. If you want the truth, come to Pier 41 at 8 tonight. Come alone. I recognized the pier immediately. It was the exact location Ethan had deliberately leaked to the traitor inside his own organization. I looked up. This is another trap. Of course it is, Ethan replied. The question is who the trap was built for. He immediately summoned every remaining captain. A digital map illuminated across the wall, showing shipping routes, emergency service traffic, and the territories controlled by rival mafia families. 3 separate convoys were already moving toward the waterfront from different directions. None of them knew Ethan had quietly redirected his actual leadership council to another location hours earlier. They are gathering every enemy in one place, one captain observed. Ethan shook his head. No, someone else is gathering them. We are simply being invited to watch. He assigned each captain a precise objective. One would secure financial records. Another would evacuate civilian employees from nearby businesses. A third would monitor every police communication channel without interfering. There were no reckless orders and no desire for revenge. Every instruction focused on limiting chaos before it began. That was the moment I realized his greatest weapon had never been fear. It was preparation. As evening settled over Manhattan, Ethan and I approached the waterfront from opposite directions using separate vehicles. The harbor looked strangely calm beneath the fading orange sky. Cargo cranes stood motionless against the horizon, while dozens of expensive black sedans quietly filled nearby parking lots. Representatives from rival families stepped onto the pier one after another, each believing they had arrived first. Minutes later, unmarked police vehicles surrounded the area from the opposite side. Neither group seemed surprised to see the other. They had expected confrontation. Then giant outdoor video screens overlooking the shipping terminal suddenly switched on without warning. Instead of surveillance footage, every screen displayed financial ledgers, private communications, and recorded meetings connecting Victor Ashcroft, Deputy Commissioner Harold Pierce, and several influential public officials to years of corruption, bribery, and manufactured conflict between organized crime and law enforcement. A wave of stunned silence rolled across the entire pier. Nobody had expected the evidence to appear publicly. Nobody understood who had released it. I turned toward Ethan. "You did this." He kept his eyes on the screens. "No," he answered calmly. "I simply made sure the truth arrived before anyone could bury it again." At that exact moment, my phone vibrated with an emergency alert from the police department. Deputy Commissioner Pierce had disappeared less than 10 minutes before the evidence began broadcasting, and security footage showed Victor Ashcroft leaving the city by helicopter. Ethan glanced toward the darkening skyline before speaking one final sentence. "The board has been overturned," he said. "Now we find the man who believed he could walk away from the game." 3 weeks later, New York looked exactly the same from the outside, yet everything underneath had changed. Investigations spread through City Hall, police headquarters, and boardrooms that had once seemed untouchable. Deputy Commissioner Harold Pierce was formally charged after investigators uncovered years of hidden financial records. Several officials quietly resigned before they could answer difficult questions. My own suspension was lifted after every accusation against me collapsed beneath verified evidence. People called it justice. I called it the beginning. Victor Ashcroft remained missing. His name appeared on every federal watch list, but Ethan never believed a man like that would disappear forever. Men who build empires from shadows never stop chasing power. He told me one evening as we overlooked the East River from the balcony of one of his private properties. The wind carried the distant sound of ferries crossing the water while Manhattan glowed beneath the fading sunset. "Then why are you still looking for him?" I asked. Ethan rested both hands on the stone railing. "Because unfinished games always become future wars." His answer sounded less like determination than experience. During the weeks that followed, I watched the Moretti organization transform in ways I had never expected. Ethan remained the mafia boss everyone feared. That never changed. He still commanded absolute loyalty. He still negotiated with rival families from a position of undeniable strength. But inside his own organization, new rules quietly appeared. Every financial transaction required independent verification. Every shipment passed through multiple levels of accountability. Anonymous intelligence could never again influence major decisions without confirmation from separate sources. The empire had not become weaker. It had become smarter. One afternoon, I returned to the alley where everything had begun. The rain had long since disappeared. Fresh pavement covered the damaged concrete, and ordinary people walked past without realizing history had nearly changed beneath their feet. I stood there for several minutes before hearing familiar footsteps behind me. Ethan stopped beside me without speaking. Neither of us needed to explain why we had come back. "You could have left me there," I said quietly. He looked toward the empty street instead of answering immediately. "Yes." "Why did you not?" His expression remained calm, but there was something different in his eyes now. Not softness, clarity. "Because the people hunting you were already hunting me. Saving your life was the logical decision." I laughed gently. That is the answer the mafia boss gives. A faint smile appeared for only a moment. "Would you prefer another one?" I shook my head. "No. I think I finally understand you." Silence settled comfortably between us. We still lived on opposite sides of the law. I remained a police officer. Ethan remained the head of one of the most powerful mafia families in America. Neither of us pretended those facts had changed. Yet trust had grown where suspicion once existed because it had been earned one decision at a time. As I prepared to leave, Ethan reached into his coat and handed me the small metal flash drive that had started everything. "Keep it," he said. "It belongs to the person who survived because of it." I turned it over in my hand and noticed something I had missed before. Hidden beneath the worn silver symbol were 4 tiny engraved words. "The truth survives those who protect it." When I looked up again, Ethan was already walking toward the waiting black SUV as his security team quietly followed. He never looked back. He did not need to. The city would always remember him as the mafia boss who ruled an empire from the shadows. I would remember something else entirely. On the darkest night of my life, the man everyone believed would leave me to die became the only reason I lived. And sometimes the greatest shock is not discovering that a powerful man can command an empire, but discovering that he still chooses, when nobody is watching, to save a single life.